I am one of the biggest combat sports fans out there. I really am. I've been participating in martial arts my whole life. I have been watching UFC and Bellator religiously since I was a little kid. I have been involved in MMA like in my space. I'm always talking about MMA. I'm always thinking about MMA. The point is, I really am one of the biggest combat sports fans out there. I'm a martial arts fan, and now I'm even following other organizations like One Championship and LFA. I've been watching every single one of their events. I am planning on now continuing and watching the PFL. I'm continuing adding that to the roster of things that I need to watch. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why in this video because they have my full support. They really do. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's talk about the PFL. So this all came when I started watching Ariel Helwani's channel. He had Donn David on, who, as far as I'm concerned, and please forgive me if I get any information wrong here, because I'm brand new to following the PFL. He's kind of like the Dana White of the PFL, so he's in charge of everything. He's the one with all the money. You get the point. He's the one in charge of all the money. So he was interviewing with Ariel Helwani, and I really got a good feeling from where he was coming. The biggest thing that really made me sit back and say, okay, I'm going to support the PFL and what they do, because again, I support so many other fighting organizations. I've only watched one PFL event ever. Nothing about the PFL ever really screamed out to me. Plus, I'm just a combat sports fan in general. I like watching it. Something I didn't mention is I even watch Bare Knuckle. I watched Jorge Masvidal's Game Bread event. And I really enjoyed that too. So like, again, my whole point in saying this is I have been supporting all of these, and Donn David really made me happy. He really made me happy because Ariel asked him the question I was wondering, right? Because, of course, the PFL just acquired Bellator. Bellator is one of my favorite MMA organizations. I always joke about on the channel where it's like, I think I'm Bellator's biggest fan, because you don't hear that too often. I love everything about Bellator, and throughout this past year when we found out that Bellator was getting bought out, I was honestly really sad about it, because I have so many memories of like my dad, my uncles, and I sitting back and watching some Bellator, and I've been following Bellator again since I was a little kid. Bellator coming to an end would be like kind of like the WEC coming to an end in a sense. You know, everybody building that relationship, everybody constantly watching us, and all of a sudden it's just not a thing anymore. So I was going throughout this entire year waiting for the announcement for Bellator to officially be over, and every single time we sat down and watched Bellator, the conversation came up where either myself or my father was saying, wow, I'm going to really miss Bellator, man. I'm really going to miss Bellator. And it's sad that it's going to an end. But all of a sudden, the announcement's here. The PFL acquires Bellator. And Bellator is remaining as its own reimagined organization in 2024. So Bellator is going to continue on as Bellator. I was wondering why that was. I had made a little bit of a reaction to that, and I was like, I don't see the big deal about it. Like, I don't see why this decision would be made. And then Donn David came on, and he was like, well, Bellator has had a long time following for however many years. He said how many years it was. I don't even remember off the top of my head how long Bellator's been on. But Bellator has had a dedicated following. We don't want to just squash that. And I'm like, that's really the reason? That's the reason? You could get all of these fighters under your organization in the PFL. You could absorb some of the best talent in MMA. You could have the roster that could rival the UFC. But you're willing to keep the PFL with their subpar talent and have Bellator continue on as its own thing for the fans? That made me so insanely happy that, honestly, in that moment, I sat back and I'm like, I will support the PFL. I will support this guy. I will support Donn David and his journey to becoming a rival with the UFC. And guys, I'm not going to lie to you. In saying that, I'm a UFC fan first. I'll forever cheer for Dana White. I'll forever cheer for the UFC. Like, there was another thing like Ariel and Donn were talking about where, oh, Dana White's being dismissive because he's worried about us. And I'm sitting here like, okay, yeah, Dana White's worried about you. Like, that's not going to happen. But I'm on Team UFC. But why not? Why not also support this? Why not also give this a chance? A guy who didn't squash my beloved Bellator, which could have been so easy to do. And arguably, I see it as a better option. I'm just sitting here with a guy behind a microphone, but I could be totally wrong about that. But I don't see any reason to not just get rid of Bellator and have all the fighters come in the PFL. You're doing it for the fans. That's amazing. And the only cost that comes to that, which is a pro to the fighters, where it's like, hey, if you want to compete in this PFL season, you can just come over. You can come have a fight. If you feel like fighting somebody in the PFL, come on and do it. We're going to have some grand events where it's PFL versus Bellator. And that's bad for the PFL. The Bellator guys are good. The Bellator guys are so underrated. They can rival UFC talent. They're going to stop the PFL guys just like they did with Ryzen. So what the PFL is doing, what Donn David is doing right now, I really respect it. And he was always talking about, okay, we want the MMA fan first. We want the fighter first. And after listening to this whole thing, I really agree with him. Because he's taken on all the employees from Bellator. He's like, hey, can you guys, I would love it if you guys stayed on. He's not firing anybody. That's like really, really cool to see. I really like that. So he's honestly just expanding Bellator. That's great for Bellator. That's great for the PFL. You want to have championship versus championship matchups? These are going to be like grand events, guys. Bellator is going to continue as a reimagined thing. And if PFL fighters, another thing you mentioned, if PFL fighters feel like fighting over in Bellator, they're more than welcome to. If they want to just have 3 fight a year type thing on Bellator, they can go do that. What he is saying and saying like the fighter will come first. That's awesome. He's actually living up to that. So it's really, really cool to see, man. And like I said, the reason I'm going to start supporting PFL, the reason I'm going to start following it, and I'm not going to lie, I understand, especially from the first event that I watched, the talent isn't at the same level. Yes, they have some great fighters. Yes, they do. But it's obvious, guys. The talent is not at the same level as Bellator 1 Championship and the UFC. I would even go as far as to say LFA. It's not comparable. But if you were to acquire these Bellator fighters, then yeah, you obviously would have that. But they're not doing that. Fan first, fighter first. That's probably going to lose you a lot of money. But hey, man, you have my respect. You are doing nothing but respecting the Bellator fans. Again, guys, that was the whole reason. We didn't want to squash something that Bellator fans loved. That's me, man. That's me. And I know there's a bunch of Bellator fans out there, but this could have absolutely been something that you could have sacrificed. So I love it. And I will be supporting what the PFL does. I will be supporting it. I'm not going to lie, though. In saying this, I know a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, PFL, let's go. PFL's the next big thing. Yeah, down with Dana White. Down with the UFC. They actually care about their fighters. I've always thought that was a ridiculous statement. The UFC does care about their fighters. I think a lot of fighters over there, especially Francis Ngannou, are very ungrateful for their opportunities in the UFC. That's my opinion on that. So in saying this, in saying that I'm over here supporting the PFL now, that's like, I will be watching their events. I'm not going to be like going crazy like I do. I'm not going to be talking about the PFL stuff going on unless something like really interesting comes up. I probably will, but I will be supporting the UFC first. And of course, if you want to know, 1 Championship is my favorite organization. This is good for MMA, man. It's good for MMA. It's good for the fans. I'm just happy Bellator is going to stick around. I was really sad about it this year. I honestly was. But guys, let me know what you think about this down below. Did you watch the interview with Donn David? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this entire situation. Again, thank you so much for watching this video, everybody on the screen right now. If you'd like to continue watching the Clenbat channel, there'll be 2 videos on screen for you to check out. I will see you either there or in the next video, everybody. Take care.